Mama, somebody help me. Adigo, what is this? Mama, help me, please. I don't know. I woke up like this. Adigo was a young lady whose beauty made everyone in the village stop and look whenever she passed. She had smooth, dark skin that shone in the sun, eyes as bright as the morning, and a smile that could calm a crying baby. She was the only child of her mother, Mama Adigo, who sold roast corn in the village market and always wore a cheerful face. Everyone said Adigo took her mother's beauty, but in a stronger measure. If her mother was a candle, Adigo was the bright morning sun. Men from different parts of the village would come to see her, bringing her and her mother tubers of yam, kegs of palm wine, cassava, groundnuts, even baskets of tomatoes, and fresh fish just to win her heart. Some would pretend they were just being kind to Mama Adigo, but everyone knew they wanted Adigo to look at them with her sweet smile. Adigo would smile and say, "Thank you, my brother," then laugh lightly. She enjoyed the gifts but did not mind the men too much. She would help her mother roast corn in the evening and laugh with her friends, not minding the men who stood far away, watching her as if she was the only water in a dry land. Her father, Papa Adigo, was the happiest man in the village. When he went to any palm wine joint, young men would rush to pay for his drink, hoping he would give his daughter's hand in marriage. Papa Adigo would smile from ear to ear, pressing his big belly and laughing, saying, "Ah, you people want my daughter Adigo? Ain, you have to try harder." He would drink the free palm wine, chew the kola nut, and laugh again, while the young men would beg him, "Papa Adigo, please let me marry her. I can give you a goat, even a plot of land." Meanwhile, in another small mud hut in the same village, Moyo, Adigo's stepsister, was boiling with jealousy. Moyo was also a young girl with soft skin and a round face, but people did not notice her much. Men would pass her by to go and greet Adigo, and this made her angry. She would look at her mother, Mama Moyo, and complain, "Mama, I am even more beautiful than Adigo, but see how men bring yams and palm wine to her. I am sure she is using charm on the men." Mama Moyo would sometimes hiss and wave her hand. "Forget about her, my daughter. Maybe it is just her luck." But this time, Mama Moyo looked at Moyo quietly and nodded her head slowly. "You may be right, Moyo. Maybe she is using charm, but let me tell you the truth. Adigo is beautiful." Moyo's face squeezed like a baby who just tasted bitter leaf. "Mama, so you are saying I am not beautiful? Am I a goat? Why don't men look at me the way they look at her?" Mama Moyo looked at her daughter's angry face and burst out laughing, slapping her thigh. "You, this girl, you look like me, and I am beautiful too. But let me not lie, Adigo's beauty is shining too much." But as Mama Moyo laughed, her eyes became small and sharp like a cat. She stopped laughing and looked around carefully before leaning closer to Moyo. "Moyo, listen to me," she whispered. "Tonight, we will go somewhere together. We will put an end to this madness, once and for all." Moyo's eyes widened and her heart began to beat fast. "Mama, where are we going?" "Just wait, you will see," Mama Moyo replied with a wicked smile. That night, it rained heavily. The wind blew hard, shaking the small huts in the village, and thunder roared in the sky like an angry drum. Everyone stayed indoors, covering themselves with wrappers. But Mama Moyo and Moyo did not care about the rain. Mama Moyo told Moyo's younger siblings, "Lock the door and tell your father we went to ease ourselves. If he asks, tell him we will soon come back." They wrapped their heads with black cloth, tied their wrappers tightly, and stepped out into the cold rain, carrying a small black calabash wrapped in red cloth. The mud road was slippery, and the cold water soaked their wrappers, making them shiver. Moyo almost slipped and fell, but Mama Moyo held her hand. Moyo wanted to ask where they were going, but fear tied her tongue. As they walked, thunder struck again, and Moyo jumped. "Mama, are we not going to die in this rain?" Mama Moyo hissed, "Keep quiet. Do you want the spirits to hear us and scatter our plans? Just walk." As they reached a bush path near the big iroko tree, a loud owl hooted above them, and Moyo screamed, "Mama, a witch, a witch!" Mama Moyo slapped her back. "It is not a witch. It is an owl. Keep quiet before you wake the spirits." Moyo's teeth were shaking, not just from the cold but from fear. She regretted following her mother, but it was too late to run back. She started praying in her heart, "God, if I come back alive, I will never follow Mama again at night." They finally reached a small clearing where the rain did not touch the ground because of the thick leaves above. Mama Moyo dropped the calabash on the ground and began to chant, her voice mixing with the sound of the rain. Moyo looked around and saw small red eyes blinking in the darkness. She did not know if they were rats or spirits, but she was too scared to ask. Suddenly, Mama Moyo shouted, "Moyo, bring out the mirror!" Moyo's hands were shaking as she brought out a small cracked mirror from her wrapper. Mama Moyo took the mirror and placed it on top of the calabash, and she began to chant again, calling Adigo's name. The wind blew stronger and the rain fell harder, but Mama Moyo's voice was louder than the rain. "Moyo, repeat after me," Mama Moyo commanded. Moyo's lips were trembling, but she repeated the words her mother was saying, calling Adigo's name, telling the spirits to take away her beauty and give it to her. Suddenly, a flash of lightning struck near them, and they both screamed, falling into the mud. "Mama, I want to go home," Moyo cried, her body shaking. But Mama Moyo held her hand tightly, her eyes shining with strange light. "It is too late to go back now, Moyo," Mama Moyo said, her voice deep and strange. Moyo was trembling as they finished the strange thing her mother made her do that rainy night. The thunder still roared far away, and the cold rain made her body shake, but fear was the biggest thing, making her shake like a chicken under the rain. She held her mother's wrapper tightly as they walked back to the village. Her feet slipped in the mud, and she almost fell many times. Her heart was beating fast. She could still hear her mother's chants in her ears, calling Adigo's name, calling spirits to take her beauty. "Mama, are we safe?" Moyo asked with tears in her eyes. "Keep quiet and walk," Mama Moyo hissed at her, looking around to see if anyone was watching them. When they reached their hut, Moyo did not wait. She banged on the wooden door. "Open! Open!" One of Moyo's younger siblings came, sleepy-eyed, and opened the door. Moyo did not wait. She jumped inside and ran to sit on a wooden chair, breathing fast, her wrapper dripping water on the mud floor. She held her chest, trying to calm her fast-beating heart. Her hands were cold, and she kept remembering the strange chants, the thunder, the mirror, and the calabash in the bush. Her small sister looked at her and asked, "Sister, what happened? Why are you shaking like that?" Before Moyo could answer, Mama Moyo shouted, "Go and sleep. Go inside now." The little girl jumped and ran inside to the mat, afraid of her mother's loud voice. The room became quiet except for the sound of Moyo's teeth chattering. She leaned forward, looked at her mother with fear, and whispered, "Mama, are you a witch?" Mama Moyo's eyes widened. "Keep quiet," she shouted in a low voice, looking around quickly, even though they were alone. "But Mama," Moyo tried to speak. "I said keep quiet before you bring trouble to us," Mama Moyo snapped, pointing a warning finger at her. That night, Moyo could not sleep well. Every small sound made her jump. When the wind blew the window open, she screamed, thinking it was a spirit. Her mother kept hissing at her, telling her to sleep. Finally, the morning came, and Moyo closed her eyes, tired, but she heard a loud scream from the next compound. "Ah, Mama, somebody help me." Moyo and her mother jumped up from their mat. They looked at each other, fear and confusion on their faces. "Let's go and see," Mama Moyo said quickly, tying her wrapper and rushing out. Moyo followed closely, holding her mother's wrapper again. They ran towards the screaming, and many villagers were already running to see what was happening. Some were afraid and hid behind trees, while others stood on their toes, trying to see. Lo and behold, it was Adigo. But this was not the Adigo everyone knew. She looked like a skeleton. Her skin was dry and pale. Her eyes were sunken, and her cheeks were hollow. Her beautiful hair looked rough and scattered, and her wrapper was hanging loosely on her thin frame. People were so scared that they covered their mouths and ran far from the hut. Some women shouted, "Adigo, what is this?" while some children hid behind their mothers. Adigo sat on the ground, looking at her hands and crying. She could not believe it was her own body. She touched her face, hoping it was a dream, but it was real. Mama Adigo, her mother, was the only person who stayed beside her, crying and holding her. Tears fell from her eyes as she asked, "Adigo, my child, what happened? Why are you looking like this? Did you have a bad dream?" Adigo looked at her mother, opened her mouth to talk, but no words came out. She only cried, tears rolling down her thin cheeks, wishing she could wake up from the nightmare. People gathered around the hut, but were too afraid to come close. Some said it was witchcraft. Some said maybe Adigo stole someone's husband. Some said she used charm on men, and the charm had backfired. A few hours later, Adigo's father, Papa Adigo, returned from the farm. A young man was walking behind him, carrying Papa Adigo's firewood on his head. The young man was strong, with muscles from farming. He dropped the firewood beside Papa Adigo's kitchen and wiped the sweat from his face. Then he knelt down, saying, "Papa Adigo, I want to remind you of your promise. You said you will help me to talk to Adigo so she can marry me." Papa Adigo was about to laugh and give the young man a kola nut when Moyo arrived, panting. "Papa! Papa!" she shouted. Papa Adigo looked at her with surprise. "What is it, Moyo? Why are you running and shouting like a goat?" "Something has happened to Adigo," Moyo shouted, pointing towards their hut. Papa Adigo and the young man looked at each other and quickly ran towards the hut, with Moyo running behind them. When they entered, they saw Adigo sitting on the floor, looking like a skeleton, crying. Mama Adigo was sitting beside her, tears falling, as she held her daughter's bony hands. Papa Adigo and the young man gasped loudly. The young man even fell back and sat on the floor, holding his head. "Is this Adigo?" Papa Adigo asked, pointing at her, and her mother nodded in tears. "Adigo, my daughter, what happened to you?" Papa Adigo shouted, tears filling his eyes. Adigo could not answer. She only looked at him with tears rolling down. Mama Adigo was crying, I don't know, my husband. I don't know what happened to our daughter. She woke up like this. People outside the hut were murmuring, saying it was a curse, saying it was the work of the spirits. Mama Moyo was there too, standing in the corner, pretending to cry. She wiped her fake tears and shook her head, saying, Oh, Adigo, what happened? Oh God, help us! But inside her heart, she was smiling, thinking, Good. Let us see which man will bring yam for her now. That evening, Papa Adigo could not sit still. He called Mama Adigo. We cannot leave our daughter like this. We must take her to the native doctor. They lifted Adigo gently, and Papa Adigo, Mama Adigo, and 2 young men helped to carry her to the native doctor's place at the edge of the village. The road was quiet, and people peeped from their huts as they passed, whispering and shaking their heads. When they reached the native doctor's small mud house, the native doctor was sitting outside, wearing red cloth, with cowries tied around his neck. His eyes were small and sharp, like a lizard's eyes. He looked at Adigo and shook his head slowly. They laid Adigo down, and the native doctor brought out his cowries, bones, and small bottles. He began to chant and throw the cowries on the floor, looking at them carefully. Papa Adigo and Mama Adigo waited, holding hands and praying silently. After some time, the native doctor sighed. I cannot see who did this or how it was done, he said, looking at them. Mama Adigo began to cry loudly. Please help us. I don't want to lose my only child. The native doctor raised his hand. Calm down, woman. I see a solution. Until Adigo finds true love, she will remain like this. Papa Adigo and Mama Adigo looked at each other. I don't understand, said Papa Adigo. If she finds a man who truly loves her, a man who loves her enough to marry her, she will return to her former self, even more beautiful, replied the native doctor. They all looked at Adigo, who was crying softly, and Papa Adigo wiped his tears. How will we know who truly loves her now? He asked. The native doctor stood up and looked at them. Time will tell. Let's pray. The spirit of true love shows itself. Adigo and her mother returned home from the native doctor's place, and they both could not stop crying. Mama Adigo held her daughter close, wiping her tears with the edge of her wrapper, but she was also crying. My daughter, don't cry, Mama Adigo would say, but her voice would break and tears would drop from her eyes. Adigo would look at her thin arms and her dry legs and cry even more. Mama, why me? Mama, what did I do to deserve this? Which sane man will love someone who looks like me? Every day, Mama Adigo would cook herbs and give Adigo to drink, hoping she would get stronger, and Adigo would sip them slowly, tears falling into the cup. Weeks passed, and Adigo could now walk slowly by herself, though she looked like a moving skeleton. The children in the village would see her and run away, screaming, Masquerade! Masquerade! One early morning, Adigo and her mother stepped out of their hut to light the fire for cooking breakfast. Mama Adigo had tied her old wrapper, and Adigo was wearing her mother's scarf to cover her rough hair. They were about to fetch water when they heard loud voices and laughter. They turned their heads and saw young men gathered in front of Mama Moyo's hut. Each young man was carrying something: baskets of yams, cassava, palm oil, smoked fish, and even cola nuts. Mama Moyo, please let me marry Moyo. I love her, one of the young men shouted, holding a basket of big yams. Another young man pushed forward. No, I love her more. Mama Moyo, see what I brought. Palm oil and smoked fish. The men began arguing among themselves, pushing each other, trying to show who loved Moyo the most. One said he would build Moyo a new hut. Another said he would buy her a goat. The place was noisy and the young men looked excited. Adigo and her mother stood there, staring with dropped jaws. They could not believe their eyes. It was as if all the men who once chased Adigo had now turned to Moyo. Adigo turned to her mother, her eyes filled with tears. Mama, are you sure Mama Moyo does not know something about what happened to me? Mama Adigo looked at her, sighed, and shook her head. My daughter, Mama Moyo may be wicked, but I don't think she would do such a thing. But deep in her heart, Mama Adigo began to wonder too. Just then, the young men turned and noticed Adigo standing there. They all stopped shouting for a moment, looked at her from head to toe, and burst into loud laughter. Ah, Adigo, your time has passed, one of them shouted. When we were bringing you yams and palm wine, you were doing like a peacock, raising your shoulders, another added. See you now, you are like broomstick, one shouted, laughing so hard that he bent over. The men continued laughing loudly, and the sound pierced Adigo's heart. Her eyes filled with tears, and she turned around and ran back into the hut, crying loudly. Mama, they are laughing at me. Mama, they are laughing at me, she wept. Mama Adigo rushed in after her and held her tight. My daughter, don't mind them. Please don't mind them. But tears rolled down her own face. Outside, the laughter continued, and Moyo came out of the hut, wearing a new wrapper, with her shoulders high like a proud hen. She looked at Adigo's hut, hissed loudly, and walked past without greeting. Masquerade, Moyo said loudly so that everyone would hear. The young men laughed and followed Moyo around like chickens following corn. From that day, Moyo would purposely pass in front of Adigo's hut every morning, wearing fine wrappers and smiling, ignoring Adigo and her mother. Sometimes she would look at Adigo and laugh softly, saying, Masquerade. Adigo would sit in the corner of the hut, hugging her knees, crying quietly. She would cover her face when people passed, so they would not see her. A few days later, Papa Adigo came back from the palm wine joint. His wrapper was hanging loosely on his waist, and his eyes were red. He had been drinking too much, and when he walked, he staggered like a goat with weak legs. He pushed the door of Mama Adigo's hut and entered. Mama Adigo was cooking watery soup for Adigo, using small dry fish she borrowed from a neighbour. My husband welcome, Mama Adigo greeted, wiping her hands on her wrapper. Papa Adigo did not answer immediately. He sat down on the wooden chair and sighed deeply. Then he looked at Mama Adigo with tired eyes and said, I cannot take this anymore. Mama Adigo looked at him, confused. What do you mean? Everywhere I go, people laugh at me. Papa Adigo said, rubbing his face with his rough palm. At the palm wine joint today, they laughed, saying, See Adigo's father, see how his beautiful daughter now looks like a ghost. They laughed, and I could not drink my palm wine in peace. Tears gathered in Mama Adigo's eyes. What do you want me to do? Papa Adigo looked at her and said, Take Adigo to your village. Let her stay there. Moyo's wedding is coming, and people will come from far and near. I don't want them to come here and see Adigo looking like this. Mama Adigo felt as if hot water had been poured on her. She could not believe what she was hearing. So you want me to take Adigo away from her own father's house because of Moyo's wedding? Papa Adigo nodded. Yes, it is for the best. I am tired of the shame. Mama Adigo's lips shook. You are choosing Moyo's wedding over your own daughter. Papa Adigo looked away, unable to meet her eyes. In the other room, Adigo was sitting on the floor, listening to everything. Tears fell from her eyes as she hugged her knees tightly. She could not believe her father was sending her away because she was now ugly. That night, Mama Adigo could not sleep. She sat outside, looking at the moon, tears rolling down her cheeks. Adigo came and sat beside her, and they hugged each other, crying quietly. Mama, why is the world so wicked to me? Adigo whispered. Mama Adigo kissed her forehead. My child, I don't know, but God sees everything. The next morning, very early, while the cock was still crowing, Papa Adigo woke Mama Adigo up. It is time. Please leave now, he said coldly. Mama Adigo stood up, tied her wrapper, and wiped her tears. She went inside and woke Adigo up. My daughter, we have to go. They said we should leave, she said softly. Adigo opened her eyes, and tears began to flow immediately. She sat up slowly, looking around the hut that had been her home, her heart breaking. They packed their small bags, just 2 old bags with wrappers, a small cooking pot and a broken mirror. They tied the bags with old cloth. As they stepped out of the hut, Moyo and her mother were standing outside, watching them. Moyo was wearing a bright new wrapper, smiling, while Mama Moyo crossed her hands on her chest. Good riddance, Mama Moyo whispered to Moyo. Adigo and her mother did not look at them. They held their small bags and began to walk down the narrow bush path, leaving the village. The early morning dew wet their feet, and the birds chirped as if nothing was happening, but in Mama Adigo and Adigo's hearts it felt like the sky was falling. Adigo turned back one last time to look at the village she grew up in, the place where she was once the pride of the village, the place where young men brought her yams and palm wine, and tears rolled down her face. Now they were sending her away like a shameful secret. Adigo and her mother arrived at Mama Adigo's village after many hours of walking along the narrow bush path. Their legs were dusty and their feet hurt. They were tired, hungry, and their hearts were heavy. Mama Adigo led her daughter through the small village road, holding her bag on her head, while Adigo carried a smaller bag. Adigo covered her head and part of her face with a wrapper, but even with the wrapper, her thin body and dry arms were visible. People in Mama Adigo's village were sitting under trees, pounding yam or roasting corn when they saw them coming. At first, they did not recognize who it was. But as Adigo and her mother came closer, people's eyes grew wide with shock. Some women covered their mouths, whispering, "Is that a spirit?" Some children who were playing with sticks dropped them and ran away, screaming, "Masquerade! Masquerade!" Adigo heard them and felt tears forming in her eyes. She tried to hide her face deeper inside the wrapper, but it did not help. People were still looking and moving away from the road to avoid coming close to her. Mama Adigo held her daughter's hand. "My child, just keep walking, don't mind them." They finally reached Mama Adigo's late mother's house, which was now empty, with cracks on the mud walls and dry leaves on the ground. Mama Adigo opened the old wooden door with her shaking hands, and they stepped inside. They dropped their small bags and sat down, tired and quiet. Adigo looked around the small room, remembering the stories her mother used to tell her about how her grandmother would cook sweet palm nut soup in the same house. Now it was dusty and empty, and she was sitting there like a shadow of herself. They had not even rested well when a tall man wearing a red cap and holding a long staff arrived. He was one of the king's guards. "Good afternoon," the guard said with a loud voice. Mama Adigo stood up quickly. "Good afternoon, sir." "The king wants to see you and your daughter now," the guard said. Adigo and her mother's hearts beat fast with fear. Why did the king want to see them so soon? Had they done something wrong already? Mama Adigo tied her wrapper well and held Adigo's hand. "Let us go," as they walked to the king's palace. People followed them. Some carried their children, standing at a distance, watching Adigo as if they were looking at a strange animal. Some whispered, "She looks like a ghost," while others said, "Is she really human?" Adigo heard everything, and her eyes were full of tears, but she did not cry out loud. She held her mother's hand tightly. They arrived at the king's palace, a large mud building with a big compound where goats and chickens moved around freely. The king was sitting on a wooden chair with a carved lion's head, wearing a long white cloth with beads on his neck. When the king saw Adigo, he gasped and covered his mouth, his eyes wide in shock. People gathered at the palace, pressing against each other, trying to see Adigo clearly. The king looked at Mama Adigo. "Woman, what has happened to your child?" Mama Adigo knelt down with tears in her eyes. "My king, please forgive us for causing fear in the village. My daughter was once the most beautiful girl in our village, but something happened to her. Her beauty disappeared overnight, and now people run away from her." She explained quickly how men once came with yams and palm wine for Adigo, and how they woke up one morning to find her looking like this, and how her father sent them away because people were laughing at them. The king looked at Adigo again, and his eyes softened. He sighed. "You can stay in this village, but Adigo must not scare people unnecessarily. Let her stay inside the house always, so the villagers will not be afraid." Mama Adigo nodded. "Thank you, my king. We will obey." Adigo and her mother returned to the small house. From that day, Adigo stayed indoors always. She would only come outside very early in the morning when the sky was still dark, or late at night when people were inside their huts. Mama Adigo fetched water, cooked, and went to the market to sell firewood and vegetables to get small money for them to eat. Adigo would help by washing the plates inside the house or cleaning the floor, but her heart was always heavy. She missed seeing the sun, she missed laughing with her friends, and she missed being the beautiful Adigo that everyone loved. One day, without any warning, Mama Adigo fell terribly sick. She started coughing heavily, and her body became hot like fire. She could not get up from the mat, and her eyes were always closed. She would whisper, "Water, water," and Adigo would bring water to her, helping her drink. Adigo was afraid. She had never seen her mother so weak before. She sat beside her mother, holding her hand, tears falling from her eyes. "Mama, please don't leave me," Adigo would cry softly. But Mama Adigo could not reply. She only squeezed Adigo's hand weakly. For the first time since they came to the village, Adigo had to go out alone to fetch water and buy herbs for her mother. Early in the morning, she wrapped herself well with a thick wrapper, covering her head and part of her face, and carried a clay pot to the river. As she walked, people saw her and ran away, some screaming in fear. At the river, women were washing clothes and fetching water. When they saw Adigo, they shouted, dropping their clothes, and ran away, leaving buckets and clothes behind. Adigo stood there, her hands shaking, tears filling her eyes. She bent down and began to fetch water, tears dropping into the pot as she filled it. As she turned to leave, she saw that even children were hiding behind trees, peeping at her and running away when she turned. Adigo walked home slowly, crying, carrying the heavy pot on her head while people ran away from her as she passed. Suddenly, a voice called, "Wait, let me help you." Adigo stopped and turned slowly. Standing before her was a young farmer named Kari. Kari was tall, with strong arms from working on the farm, and he had kind eyes that made people feel warm. Kari looked at Adigo with compassion. He did not run away like the others. He did not laugh at her. He smiled gently. "Give me the pot. I will help you carry it home." Adigo's eyes widened and her lips trembled. "Are you not afraid of me?" Kari shook his head. "I know you are a human being. You need help, and I will help you." Adigo could not believe it. She slowly lowered the pot from her head, and Kari lifted it with ease, balancing it on his strong shoulder. They began to walk together. Adigo walked beside him, her heart beating fast. She kept looking at him, wondering why he was not afraid, why he was not laughing at her. As they walked, people peeped from their huts, whispering, "Is Kari mad? Why is he walking with that spirit?" But Kari did not mind them. He turned to Adigo and smiled. "Don't listen to them. You are still a human being, and you deserve kindness." Tears rolled down Adigo's face, but this time they were tears of surprise and a small light of happiness in her heart. When they reached Adigo's house, Kari helped her put the pot down and said, "If you need help, let me know. I will help you." Adigo looked at him, her lips shaking. "Thank you, Kari. Thank you very much." Kari smiled and waved before walking back to his farm, while Adigo stood there, watching him until he disappeared down the path. For the first time in a long while, Adigo felt hope in her heart. To be continued in few hours. Please stay with us. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and help share. Thank you so much for watching. Where are you watching from?